You've played the roles, met the expectations, and done everything right. So why does it feel like something's missing? Welcome to the Unwritten Woman, a space for the woman who knows she's more than the life she's been given. I'm Kristen, author of Unlocking Authenticity, a journey from people-pleasing to empowerment. And I know firsthand what it's like to break free from the mold and start rewriting your story. Here, we have real conversations about unlearning, unbecoming, and stepping into the fullness of who you are on your own terms. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's dive in. Now you get to choose new responses. You get to create new patterns for yourself. And that's not an easy process, but what I will say is that it's a necessary one. If you don't want to be labeled as aggressive, if you don't want to be labeled as a people pleaser, if you don't want to be labeled as a runner or a track star, if you don't want to be labeled as avoidant, because if you think about the woman that you want to be, the woman that you want to be is not a fighter. She's not a runner. She's not avoidant. And she's not a people pleaser. So in order for you to become her, you have to change those patterns. You can't continue to be a people pleaser and still become this woman that you envision for yourself. That's not going to work. Okay. So before we go any further, let me just make sure you understand that's not going to work. All right. If you want to remain reactive, if you want to remain a control freak, if you want to remain a people pleaser, if you want to remain an avoidant person or any of those things, like maybe you should listen to a different podcast. I'm not even finna lie to you, because that's not who we are here. That's not who we are. We're rewriting our story. And so in order for us to rewrite our story, that means we cannot continue to be the person that we are right now, that we know is still fighting through trauma and triggers and, being reactive and all those things. Like I call myself a recovering people pleaser, right? Because I am not that anymore. Does it mean that I don't have these moments where it's like I have these tendencies that I could easily fall back into? Absolutely. I have those moments. Absolutely. But I have chosen new patterns for myself. And so that's the next step, is choosing new patterns to replace those old ones. So before you react, you might want to take a pause. That's the first thing. Take a pause. When you feel that trigger, when you feel that, somebody's finger is right on that button. Somebody's finger is right on that button and they're just hovering. Pause. Take a beat. Breathe before you react. Okay. Take a deep breath. Take 3 deep breaths. Okay. I don't know what you got to do, but I'm just saying, take a pause. Take a break, because that's going to give you the time and space that you need to course correct. Then what I want you to do is I want you to name the feeling. Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying name the reaction, not the reaction. I'm saying name the feeling. So now this person is hovering over this trigger button. Okay. Maybe they even pressed it. I've paused. What do I feel? Do I feel anger, or do I feel fear? Or do I feel sadness? Or do I feel disappointment? Do I feel tired? What am I actually feeling? What's the emotion that I'm actually feeling in that moment? Am I feeling unheard? Am I feeling, okay, I'm going to say this. I'm going to share. I'll share. So recently I was talking to a friend. And actually yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about like our past relationships, and I went on to say I had an epiphany in the moment, which was that I constantly find myself in this cycle of relationships with the same type of person, or dealing with the same type of experience in all of my relationships, right? And it hit me that the feeling that I've constantly had in those past relationships was a feeling of just not being chosen, feeling unchosen. When I said it, as the words came out of my mouth, a tear came out of my eye because I was actually able to name the thing. I was actually able to name the thing. And since that conversation about 24 hours ago, it has been really enlightening for me. And again, I have been able to actually breathe because I've been able to name the thing. What I'm asking you to do is to name the feeling, right? So when that person triggers you, what is it that you're feeling? This is what's going to create the space for you to choose differently. By taking a break, pause, take a breath, pause, take a breath. And then name the feeling that you're experiencing in that moment. That's going to allow you the time that you need and the space that you need to choose differently. Now, say you're a recovering people pleaser like I am. Now I get to choose differently. And now I get to say, you know what? Instead of reacting in my normal way, which would be, you know what? To avoid this conflict, I'm just going to do whatever this person wants me to do. Right? So if you said you want me to move this cup from here to there, you know what? Okay, you got it. I moved the cup. I'm going to say, no, well, actually, I'm not going to move the cup and I don't need to explain anything. So it's setting a boundary without even over explaining. I'm not going to move the cup because I want the cup right here. And that's it. Not because I want the cup here, because if the cup is over here, it's on my right hand and that's my dominant hand. And so it's easier for me. No, I don't have to explain anything, right? As a recovering people pleaser, I now get to choose differently, which is to not move the cup and to not over explain. It's called setting a boundary, right? And boundaries is something that we're going to talk about later on in the season. But I promise you that in that moment, because you've taken that breath and because you've acknowledged what you're actually feeling, what your emotion is in this moment, you now have the space to choose differently. So maybe your trauma response would be to fight, right? What is my actual emotion here? My actual emotion isn't anger. My actual emotion is sadness. And so I'm going to choose differently in how I react. Because when you react out of sadness or you react out of fear, it looks and it feels different. But when you react with anger, now you're just being labeled this angry person, right? Now let's try to react based on what we actually feel, right? That our reaction and our emotions are actually aligned. And in reality, you have the ability to reframe the story. So it's not about I constantly feel rejected. It's really this person doesn't have the capacity to love me the way that I need to be loved. And that's okay. I remember having a conversation with someone a few years back, and I was really upset. And I was really upset. I was reacting out of frustration and anger, right? And I said a lot of things. And as I was talking, I realized what the real issue was and why this thing was so important to me and why it was such a big deal for me. Because honestly, I'm not even going to lie. It wasn't even my fight to fight. I had no skin in the game at all in this situation. However, I had very strong feelings about how this particular person was treating someone else. I went on to argue about why you should not have said what you said, had no empathy and you just don't care about people and all this stuff. And I just was going on and on. And then in the moment, I realized, and this is what I said, and maybe it wasn't nice to say. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe it wasn't nice to say, but I think in what I said, I was being very honest about not only how I felt, but also reframing the story, which was, you know what? I can't even blame you. I can't even blame you because I realize that everybody's built different. Everybody's built different. I am a very empathetic person. I empathize with people to the extent of like taking on their emotions and fighting their fights and, all of that. And that's something else that I'm working on because that requires heavy boundaries too. But in that moment, I was like, I can't blame you because the level of empathy and compassion that I have inside of me is not the same as what you have. I have to accept you the way that you are. And I have been putting this expectation on you that because I have this capacity, you should too, and you don't. And that sounds kind of harsh. Now that I'm saying it out loud again, like it does sound kind of harsh. I'm not going to lie. But I had to reframe it that way. And I will tell you, since that conversation, I have no longer set the expectation on this person to be this empathetic, compassionate, understanding somebody else's situation and being able to like step into somebody else's shoes and really feel how they feel. No, I can't put that on you because you don't have the capacity for that. And in reality, me putting that expectation on you based on what I think I have the capacity for, I need to be taking a step back. Like I shouldn't be carrying people's emotions in the way that I do. Right? It was a tough conversation, but I also had to be honest and say, you know what? I don't even know why I'm arguing with you about this because the truth is, and I had to reframe it, right? So how you reframe it, how you say that, still, it could have been a little bit refined, but I think it's a good example of reframing the story. So when you think about being able to take a breath, pause, right? Naming the emotion that you're experiencing, taking the time to make a new choice, right? Make a new choice, whether that's setting a boundary in that moment without over explaining, whether it means that I'm not going to react out of anger. I'm going to breathe, right? But then reframing the story to say, you know what? Maybe you just don't have the capacity that I have to empathize with people. And I have to be okay with that. And I have to accept you for that, right? Or not everyone is capable of receiving the love that I have to give. And that's okay. I have a lot of love to give. But maybe you aren't capable of receiving the love that I have to give to you. And that's okay. Or you don't care about people. No, you care about people. But maybe it's just that you don't have the capacity to care the way that I think you should care. And that's a problem. That's a me problem. That's not a you problem. That's a me issue, right? That I have this expectation that I'm putting on you that shouldn't be there. So I want you to pause. I want you to think. I'm going to ask you some questions and I want you to think about them. Obviously, you can't respond to me, but you can. You can definitely share your responses if you choose to. But I want you to definitely be writing these down, and I want you to be reflecting on these things over the next week. What is my go-to trauma response? Do I fight? Do I flee? Do I freeze? Or do I fawn? What is the underlying belief that drives that response? What would it look like to respond differently the next time? And if I could speak to the younger version of me who developed this response, what would I say to her? The goal is not to get rid of those trauma responses. It's really about understanding them and understanding what it's trying to protect you from, and then making the choice to choose differently, making the choice to stop living in survival mode and start living in thriving mode, And the only way we can get out of survival mode is to create new patterns, create new responses to the things that have been built to trigger us. The things that trigger us should no longer trigger us. There shouldn't be a button. I heard someone say a while back, why do people keep pressing my button? Why is there a button? It means we have to heal. And that doesn't mean putting another Band-Aid on there, because we've been putting Band-Aids on for the last 20, 30 years. Now it's time to take those bandages off, clean out that wound, and really start to heal. If today's episode spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Let's keep this conversation going. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And if something in this episode made you think, feel, or reflect, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment, send me a DM, or even share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And who knows, your comment or question might just inspire a future episode. Because this space isn't just about me, it's about us rewriting our stories together. So let me know, what's on your mind? What part of your life feels unwritten? I can't wait to hear from you.